This is the first weekly update I have done on time from home for probably many, many weeks. And the main reason is I haven't been away anywhere. So I have been home all of this week. I got home Saturday, and I'm doing this on a Friday. So I got home 6 days ago, recorded the last weekly update. I had just come back from Sydney back then. So being at home, I do actually get to do things on a much more normal schedule, which is nice. So I'm home all this week. I'm home all next week as well. Then Scott Helm comes on Friday next week for a bit of a holiday with his family before we eventually do NDC Security on the Gold Coast at the end of April. And as I've said before, this is probably my favourite, well, one of my favourite events. It's like saying which of your children's the favourite. It's one of them, in part because it's very, very close, in part because it's just a super chilled out environment here on the Gold Coast. And last year we just had, I think it's probably fair to say, the most enjoyable workshop I've done before because it was just so relaxed. So anyway, it has been nice to have a bit of a break from travelling. And I was thinking about it just before, and I think sometimes people think that like travelling and going to conferences and things like this, like in Sydney last week, is just all like sitting around sipping French champagne and enjoying things to the max. And I'm sure that like almost never sometimes happens. Like there are these little glimpses of really, really good fun out of it. But for the most part, it does become a very, very laborious exercise. I'm actually going to link to a post. I wrote this post, I want to say a couple of years ago, where I think it was like a 3-week trip in Europe, just back-to-backing events, and I documented it day by day. Still the longest blog post I've ever written. Worked out like 11,000 words or something that just sort of gave a really good idea of just how chaotic these trips can get. Excuse me. Now, so it has been quite a week, and that has really just allowed me to delete emails, which seems to be a lot of what I do these days. Deleting emails and loading data breaches, which brings me to the next set of incidents. So, data breaches this week. Another few incidents, and the first one's actually kind of interesting. So there's this data breach which has been called IntelliMost, and IntelliMost is this sort of spam campaign which was written about. I'm going to pull the blog post up, or the blog post. There's a proper journalist. They actually write news stories. Pull the news story up. This was written by Zach Whitaker for TechCrunch. And it's an interesting one because it was found by Bob Diachenko, who's found a lot of exposed things in the past, open S3 buckets, MongoDBs, Elasticsearches, things like that. And when we say open, just to be clear, like facing the public internet, so not firewalled off from things. Also having no password does make a database rather open. So Bob found this data, and the write-up from Zach is kind of interesting here because basically what it boils down to is you've got this database full of a combination of email address and password pairs which actually unlock people's email accounts, and then spam campaigns sent to other people that might have been the contacts of the people whose email address and password were there for the account. And what that's kind of allowed them to do is really tailor their spam message. Because if you can break into someone's email account and you can see who they communicate to, and then particularly if you start spoofing their address and tailoring the contents, well, you've got yourself a more effective spam campaign because you can effectively impersonate the individual or at least target the recipients of the address with information which is more than just generic, buy Viagra now. So that was a particularly interesting one. Now, there were several million records in this particular incident. We had 3 million. 45% of the email addresses already in Have I Been Pwned. So another one of these situations where it's like, there's a big whack of this data already there. By the way, now here's even more. So that was IntelliMost, and then there are just a couple of these, I don't want to sort of say minor because they're important for the organisations and the individuals involved in them, but a couple of these more kind of mainstream ones. So there's a service called Everybody Edits. It's a multiplayer platform game. 871,000 records there, 48% crossover with existing data and Have I Been Pwned. That was a kind of easy one to deal with because there's a public disclosure notice. Someone sent me the data, and if I can marry up the data to the service and there's a public disclosure, kind of makes my job a lot easier because I don't have to go and disclose. There are multiple other incidents I'm dealing with at the moment where I am trying to go through the disclosure process. It is not much fun. Because you don't hear anything and you spend all this time trying to find people to contact and then they don't reply. And that's painful. All right, so there's that. Third one, and I did this 20 hours ago, just yesterday. Demon Forums. Demon Forums is a hacking forum. A bunch of people on there talking about hacking people's things, everything from security vulnerabilities through to data breach trading, through to cracks for various things. It is on the very, very shady end of grey. 52,000 records there. Yes, I do appreciate the irony of a hacking forum having been hacked. They were running vBulletin. Still are running vBulletin. I didn't check the version, but if you want to sort of understand why I'm hesitating and I don't say smiling because it's not a funny thing, but just lamenting the fact that vBulletin appears yet again, go to who's been pwned in the navigation of have I been pwned, do a search for vBulletin, and there's dozens and dozens of services on there that were hacked due to running vulnerable versions of vBulletin. And I'm going to put a note here because this is something that bugs me, and I really want to kind of point this out again, which is, where was it, managed services links. I wrote a blog post some time ago about using managed services. And what I mean by this is, let's take the vBulletin example. So Demon Forums. Now Demon Forums have said, hey, let's stand up a forum so that people learn how to break into other things. And they downloaded vBulletin and they set it up on a VPS somewhere and went, oh, sweet, it's working, job done. We can all go home, knock off and go and do our hacking or whatever it is we do and not have to think about it again. And then what happens is vBulletin, being a large-ish software product now with a lot of eyes on it, people find vulnerabilities. And then vBulletin goes, oh, they found a vulnerability. We better fix it. We'll ship some patches. But the blokes running like Demon Forum or whatever else it is are off sipping Mai Tais under the palm trees or drinking champagne or whatever it is the hackers do. And they're not updating their things. And it gets out of date and not maintained. And it sort of comes back to this whole thing about like standing up any sort of website is making a big commitment. You're basically getting a puppy and you got to water it and look after. I assume you water puppies, you know what I mean. Look after it and maintain it. Now, if you don't want to do that yourself, you go and use a managed service and you effectively end up with some sort of SaaS model. You can go and get hosted vBulletin, where someone will run vBulletin for you and they will keep it watered and patched and all these things and they look after it. And yes, you pay them money, but you get back time and you don't have to do all this other stuff and then have your datas end up in have I been pwned. So I am really, really adamant that if you're going to use stuff like forum software or like on my blog, it's Ghost. I run it on Ghost Pro. People said to me when I was standing up, they went, oh, you should go and run it on Azure because if you run it on an app service you already have, you don't pay any money for it and it's free. And it's like, well, it's free when my time is free and it's not. So anyway, I'll link to that. Managed services, run managed services. Okay, so that was the data breach side of things. It's just changing pace for a moment, and obviously no new blog posts this week, but there were two Facebook things in the news that I thought were worth touching on, and this, we'll see how much I ramble on here. This might be a very short weekly update. This might go on for a bit. I want to touch on the first one. Let's just go straight to the headline. More than 500 million Facebook records were left exposed on the public internet. This doesn't sound good for Facebook. It reads badly. And in my tweet stream, I saw lots of people talking about the fact that Facebook is mishandling data. And hey, Facebook has had these other security incidents and now they've done this. This is not what happened. And we've got to divide this discussion down now into two parts. And one part is that this data was left exposed by app developers that had pulled it through legitimate Facebook APIs, pulled this data down, and then the app developers screwed up. And they left it publicly facing, same as the IntelliMost kind of spam thing. This happens all the time. People just leave troves of data publicly facing. My data has been in things like the Red Cross Blood Service data breach, just sitting there publicly facing. So someone else, in fact, it sounds like multiple parties, are responsible for the leak of this data in this fashion. And I lament the fact that so many news outlets and then so many people on Twitter echoing it have implied that it was a vulnerability on Facebook's behalf or some sort of breach on Facebook's behalf. It wasn't that. So that's the first bucket. The second bucket is, should Facebook have been providing this data to people? Because there's another discussion here altogether which goes into the realm of the big broader thing of how much data does Facebook have, how much control do we have over it, and where does it go? And we're back into sort of Cambridge Analytica era now as well. There is a very reasonable discussion to be had about whether Facebook should have made that data available to third parties in the first place. And apparently the APIs that did expose this now no longer function the same, and apparently they don't expose the same amount of data. I don't know the exact details about what they did and now do not expose, but apparently that has changed. And really, I think this is where the narrative needs to be. Like, how much data are we willing for these platforms to share? And incidentally, you can never go through and configure this yourself. We're back into the idiosyncrasies of things like cookie warnings, where you have to go through and choose which of the 2,000 ad tracking networks you want or you do not. We can't have a situation where people have to sort of explicitly and consciously choose this. We've got to get to a better default position about what social media platforms should be sharing. And wouldn't you know it, like, that is actually going to be counterintuitive to some of their financial objectives as well, because they want to share and sell as much as possible. We want to try and minimize it. So keep that in mind with the Facebook thing. Not a Facebook cock-up per se, but there is another discussion to be had about how much stuff they should have and then share as a result of it. The other thing that was in the news about Facebook, the title here on the Daily Beast, this was written up by Kevin Poulsen, is, in quotes, beyond sketchy. Facebook demanding some users' email passwords. Now, this was actually a comment made by Jake Williams, who's a very prominent bloke, very nice guy too. And, you know, Jake sort of said, this practice is beyond sketchy. So let's talk about what the practice is. It looks like when you sign up for a Facebook account now, if your email belongs to, and I think the email providers here were GMX, was it GMX? Who were the email providers here? Was there a screen cap? Wow, okay. I can't see where that's gone now. Anyway, there were a couple of different email providers here. It wasn't like Gmail or Hotmail or, does anyone still use Hotmail? Outlook.com, whatever. It wasn't those. It was another couple of providers here where when you signed up for a Facebook account, it came back and then said, hey, how about you now enter the password for that mail provider account, and then we can connect there and do things. Now, this is what's kind of really worrying. So I'm going to sort of read what it says here. To continue using Facebook, you need to confirm your email. The message demands, since you signed up with email address, you can do that automatically. Form below the message asks for the user's email password. Now, we're going to go in a couple of different directions here again. So this is literally saying you have come to Facebook. Please provide the password for a completely different service so that we can connect to that service and pull things back. Yeah, maybe it's like your contacts so that then they can find you on Facebook and you can all connect and be friends and share photos of your cat or whatever. From an execution perspective, this is terrible because it's basically Facebook, like an independent service, saying, give me the password of another service. So you're disclosing it to them. And there is a statement here from Facebook saying, we understand the password verification option isn't the best way to go about this. You reckon? Did you really need like the media backlash before you actually figured that out? So anyway, they say they said in here, look, we're not storing the passwords. I assume that they just used it as a one-time connection to the account to get whatever they needed from the account. But it's still super sort of sketchy practice, as Jake said, to request this and then also for Facebook to connect to them. There's a couple of other aspects of this we should talk about, and one of them is that if there is indeed a need for service A to communicate to service B, well, we have good technical solutions to do this. We have this wonderful OAuth dance where you will actually get let's say it's often Facebook, or it's often other apps that want access to Facebook data. So you go to this app, you go, hey, sign in with Facebook, and then the Facebook window pops up and it's served from Facebook and you authenticate from Facebook or to Facebook. And then the app can request via Facebook access to certain personal data attributes. And you're granting Facebook the right to send that to the other app. This is the way to do this. We have a technical model to do it. Now, here's where there's sort of part of this I don't entirely disagree with as well. So, yeah, one of the comments in here was around the fact that this conditions people to enter passwords for completely different services into Facebook. And technically, I agree. This is exactly what it's asking people to do, and we don't really want to set that precedent. Two comments on that. Number one is that of all the organizations you could give that to that are going to, at least from a security perspective, don't confuse this with privacy, from a security perspective, are going to look after it. And if they say that they're handling it correctly and deleting the password, etc., I'm choosing my words carefully here. They are in a better position than most to be able to do that properly. So there's that. But the other bit is that it's the nuanced difference between these two models. So the model which they have been doing, which apparently they no longer do, where it asks directly on Facebook for the password of the email service provider, and the model I just described with the pop-up and the OAuth and the authenticating to the other servers. Now, these technically are completely different because one of them's giving Facebook the data, one of them's giving the other service the data and just approving it to send the data over to Facebook. I propose that your average person has got absolutely no idea what the difference between the two is. And whether you're on Facebook and you're entering your email address password, or whether you're on Facebook and you click a link and something pops up in front of you and requests your email address password, I don't think your average person's got any idea the difference between them. If we take that sort of down the road of malicious use, and there's nothing to suggest Facebook's use was malicious, it was just poorly thought through. Phishing site, you go to a phishing site and it's like, hey, log into here, click this link so that you can authenticate, let's say it was to your Gmail account, and then they just throw up a Model pop-up. And they make sure that the Chrome on the window has the right fav icon and it has the name of Gmail and all this sort of stuff. And it's a phishing attack, and it looks identical to something that isn't a phishing attack. And when I say that, I mean you can visually make it look just the same. So if we condition people to say, go and log into one site, as part of that process, you actually need to provide your credentials to another site, and then we're trying to expect your average normal day people to know the difference between either a legitimate pop-up from the other site or a modal that's just like a div on the page, or even a pop-up that's come from another domain that just has a URL that looks a little bit like the one they used to. And all of this sort of seems to keep coming back to people making security decisions based on visual indicators and somehow being able to figure them out. They can't. It's ridiculous. I can't a lot of the time. I'll qualify what I mean by that. Very, very small typos in URLs are very, very hard for me to spot. The use of Punycode can be very, very hard to spot. URLs and modals that then scroll right off the end of the screen can be very, very hard to spot. Modals are a little bit narrow because that's the way they want to pop them up. We can no longer trust I've got to be careful now because I'm going to shoot myself in the foot. It's not that we can no longer trust the padlock. It's that we are now more conscious that anyone can get the padlock. Good sites, bad sites, everything else. We could never trust EV. That's a whole other story altogether. But you see the point. Like the argument that this is a bad practice is predicated on the fact that somehow people can differentiate the bad practice from the good. The people commenting on this are right. It's a bad practice. I think from the human element, humans just simply don't know the difference. And as much as we can go, hey, Facebook, do this properly, phishing sites don't really adhere to those rules. And they're going to do the same thing as Facebook's doing, and people just won't know the difference. Right, so that's my feelings on that. So those were sort of the things that kind of really popped out at me this week. I have got just this massive trove of like partially completed blog posts, and there's a few in there that are actually really grinding my gears at the moment that I really do want to finish. And perhaps while I've got this extended period at home, I can knock some of those off. Other things, last thing actually is sponsorship. So it's Twilio again this week. They're talking about 2FA and online transactions. And look, again, Twilio, who of course owns Authy now, does make life dead easy to integrate 2FA. Plus, with Authy, you've got a great mobile app that you can use as an authenticator app, which I certainly use all the time because it makes my life really easy. And I think I showed before, I actually run it on my watch. So I was having to authenticate to a service the other day, and it's like, do the one password, control/dance, look at my webcam over there, which does the Windows Hello with the infrared, log on, 2FA pops up, I go into the watch, I get the number, job done. It's a pretty nice way of working. It's like the best mousetrap we have at the moment that's broadly accessible to the masses. So go and check Twilio out and check out the Authy piece, check out the 2FA. And if you're running a service as well, just go and drop 2FA into it. Like, it's really easy to do with these guys. All right, so that's that for this week. I will definitely have a lot more data breaches to do between now and next week, because if some of these guys don't reply to me, I'm going to end up having to load them anyway. And I will try and get some of those blog posts that are sitting there still waiting to be done. I'll try and get those out. And this will be another week staying at home, not traveling around the world drinking champagne, which people seem to think I do on these trips. Thank you very much for watching. I'll come back next week.